My name's Grant. I'm 39, no kids, and I live in a small, slow-burning kind of town called Clarksville, Tennessee. You know the kind, porch lights on by 7, everyone pretending they're happier than they are. I work remote in IT, which means my days are quiet and uneventful, and frankly, I like it that way. Or I did, until the birthday party that torched every illusion I had about family loyalty. My wife, Rachel, and I have been together 8 years, married for 6. Things haven't been perfect, but we were a team. Or at least I thought we were. Her mother, Janine, has always had this energy, the kind that sucks all the air out of the room and leaves you feeling like you've been judged just for existing. She's the kind of woman who weaponizes birthday candles, the sort of person who smiles while making you feel 2 inches tall. And from day one, she hated me. Not openly, no. That would have been too honest. It was more in the passive-aggressive digs about my lifestyle choices, which is code for the fact that I didn't want kids. Rachel and I agreed on that early. I thought we were on the same page. But with Janine, every dinner, every holiday, every chance she got, it was the same thing. Comments about how Rachel deserved to be a mother, and how some people are just too selfish to understand what love really is. So like a joke. Always like a joke. But never funny. The crack started small. A snide remark here, a guilt trip there. But nothing could have prepared me for what went down on her 25th birthday. Yeah, Janine's. Not her 50th. Not her 60th. Her 25th birthday. That's what she called it. There were gold balloons in the shape of 2 and 5, as if shaving off 3 decades would make her less venomous. And the cake? A peanut butter chocolate layer monstrosity. She knew I was allergic. Knew it could kill me. And she still tried to make me eat it. That was the night everything broke open. So there I was, standing in the backyard of her overpriced McMansion in the suburbs, watching as Janine cut that peanut cake like she was hosting a wedding for herself. The whole place was decked out like a Pinterest board exploded. Fairy lights, champagne fountains, themed napkins that said Forever 25 in cursive gold. Guests everywhere, mostly her friends, not ours, not even Rachel's. Just women her age dressed like 20-somethings and men with too much cologne and not enough self-awareness. I stuck close to the edge of the patio, holding a glass of water like it might protect me. My throat was already tight just being near that cake. I told Janine more than once. Peanuts weren't just a preference thing. They were a trip to the hospital, EpiPen in the leg, could kill me kind of thing. She looked straight at me as she served the first slice. I could tell she was waiting for something, watching. Then she walked over, smiling like a shark, holding out a plate. She offered it to me, told me it was a special family recipe, so it would be rude not to try it. I reminded her, flatly, that I couldn't, that I was allergic. Her smile didn't even flicker. She just laughed. So I needed to stop making everything about me. Then in front of her friends, her neighbors, and my wife, she smashed the damn thing right into my face. Peanut frosting in my mouth, in my eyes, on my skin. It was like being slapped and poisoned at the same time. I dropped the plate and ran to the bathroom, my skin already burning. I didn't even look back to see Rachel's reaction. My only thought was get clean, get safe. I rinsed and scrubbed and coughed until the mirror fogged up. Then I left. Just walked straight out the front door, face still blotchy, shirt ruined, dignity somewhere back on that patio under a crushed piece of birthday cake. I didn't expect Rachel to follow me, but she didn't run after me. She followed her mother. I drove aimlessly for about 20 minutes, heart thudding like a drum, skin still stinging. I pulled into a random gas station off Route 12 and sat there in the parking lot, hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too stunned to even feel that kind of release. Just raw confusion and disbelief turning over in my gut. And then my phone buzzed. I expected it to be Rachel. It wasn't. It was her stepdad, Thomas, Janine's long-suffering, perpetually silent husband. The man had spent most of the party in the corner nursing a single beer and looking like he regretted every decision that brought him into that family. His text was short, but it hit harder than any apology from Rachel ever could. He wrote, "I'm sorry. I told her that was too far. I told her, you didn't deserve that." That's when it hit me. He knew. He knew what Janine had planned. Maybe not exactly, but enough. And he didn't stop her. Maybe couldn't. Maybe he was just another casualty of her control. But in that moment, I realized something else. I wasn't alone in how I saw her. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't overreacting. 15 minutes later, another buzz. "Rachel, just one line. Where did you go? No, are you okay? No, I'm sorry." Just that. Like I'd wandered off at a grocery store. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, another message. "You embarrassed my mom. She's upset. That was the moment something cold and final settled in my chest, like a steel door locking shut. It wasn't just the cake. It wasn't even the allergy. It was who she chose to protect. And it wasn't me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest room of my friend Micah's place, an old army buddy turned barber, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun above me like some slow, mechanical clock counting down to something I couldn't name. The room smelled like cedar and faded cologne, and all I could think about was how far off track my life had veered in just one evening. Rachel didn't call. She didn't show up. She didn't ask if I needed help, didn't offer comfort. I got radio silence, like I was the one who ruined everything. The next morning, I checked my phone and saw a flurry of missed calls and texts. Not from Rachel, but from her mother's friends. Apparently, Janine had gone full martyr, sobbing to anyone who'd listened that I stormed out and ruined her special day, that I refused her gift, yes, her gift, and that I had a history of emotional outbursts. And just like that, I became the villain in a story I didn't even write. But the real twist? Her husband, Thomas, wasn't having it. 2 days later, Rachel came home crying. Not because of what she'd done, not because of what happened to me. No, because Thomas had snapped. Apparently, he stood up in front of her entire extended family at brunch and told Janine, loudly and clearly, that he was done covering for her, that she needed help, that she wasn't just difficult or passionate. She was cruel. Rachel didn't take it well. She called it a betrayal, said Thomas had embarrassed her mother in front of everyone. I listened. I didn't say much. I didn't have to, because by then, the unraveling had already begun, and it was only going to get worse. The next few days were a strange, silent stalemate. Rachel stayed in the house. I stayed at Micah's. We exchanged a few dry, transactional texts, mostly about bills, her schedule, the dog's vet appointment. Nothing about the party. Nothing about her mother. Nothing about me. I had this gnawing suspicion that she was waiting for me to apologize. For what? I had no idea. Then came a night Rachel showed up at Micah's. Unannounced. She was standing at the bottom of the porch steps like she didn't know whether to knock or scream. I came out with a coffee in one hand, unsure if I should even speak. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't been sleeping either. The first thing she asked me wasn't, "How are you?" or "Can we talk?" It was, "Why are you trying to turn my family against me?" That was the moment I realized something vital had snapped in her. Not a break toward remorse, but into paranoia. She told me her mom was threatening to cut her off financially, which was wild because Janine had always made it clear that Rachel didn't need her money. But now, apparently, she was waving it like a sword. Said I was manipulating Thomas. Said I was escalating things that should have stayed private. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so backwards. I reminded her I was the one who got a cake in the face. I was the one who almost ended up in the hospital. I left quietly, and still somehow, I was the villain in this narrative she'd rewritten in her head. She didn't deny it. She just said, "You made it harder." I told her no. Her mother did that. Her mother did all of this. And I said the words I hadn't dared until then. Maybe your mother doesn't love you the way you think she does. That was it. The end of the conversation. She turned, got back in her car, and peeled off without another word. And I knew, deep down, that something between us had changed for good. It was a Wednesday when the real fracture happened. I remember because Micah was out back grilling chicken thighs and I was scrolling mindlessly through emails, trying to pretend like life was still normal. That's when I got a call from an unknown number. It was Thomas. He sounded calm, but there was a tremble just underneath, like a man who'd finally stopped biting his tongue after 20 years too long. He asked if we could meet. Not Rachel. Not Janine. Just me and him. Said he had something to say off the record. We met at a diner off the highway. The kind with sticky menus and vinyl booths that have absorbed 1,000 family breakdowns before ours. He didn't waste time. He looked me straight in the eye and said he was filing for divorce. I blinked. I wasn't sure I heard him right. He said Janine had humiliated him for the last time. Not just at the party, though that was the tipping point, but over years. Years of control, gaslighting, emotional manipulation. He said my refusal to eat that cake and the way I walked out with my dignity had cracked something in him wide open. It showed him what strength actually looked like. I was speechless. Then he dropped another bomb. Janine had tried this kind of stunt before, but lower stakes. Pressuring guests with food, using guilt to get her way, threatening self-harm when things didn't go exactly how she wanted. He'd looked the other way for too long. He couldn't anymore. But here's the twist. Rachel had known. About all of it. She wasn't just a daughter caught in the crossfire. She'd helped cover for her mother for years. Played cleanup. Made excuses. And now, She was spiraling because her whole foundation was crumbling and she had no idea how to stand on her own. I left that diner with my stomach in knots. Not just because of the news, but because, deep down, I'd always hoped Rachel was just misguided. I didn't want to believe she was complicit. But now, I wasn't so sure anymore. When news of the divorce leaked, and let's not pretend it was anything other than leaked, because Janine doesn't sneeze without making it a social event. The reaction from Rachel's family was swift, cruel, and almost laughably predictable. They blamed me. Not Janine, the woman who weaponized dessert like it was chemical warfare. Not Thomas, who had finally found his backbone after 20 years of being emotionally exiled in his own home. No, me, the son-in-law who refused to choke down a death sentence in the form of cake. I became the villain in a story that had been carefully written for years by people who needed a scapegoat, and I just happened to fit the costume. The phone call started with Rachel's aunt, the one who always gave me side eyes at Thanksgiving. She didn't even pretend to be nice this time. Said I'd driven a wedge between mother and daughter. That I'd poisoned Rachel's perception of her family. I almost laughed at that. Poison? The irony could have knocked me flat. Then came her cousin, a woman I've met exactly 4 times, but who decided now was the perfect moment to tell me I'd never really been one of them. Well, no argument there. And the worst, the one that made me sit down and actually feel it, was a message from Rachel's grandmother. 82 years old and mean as a hornet in July. She texted me, "You broke this family. I hope you're happy." I stared at that message for a long time. Happy? I was sleeping on a borrowed futon. My wife hadn't spoken to me in a week. My name was being dragged through group chats by people who wouldn't know empathy if it bit them. And yet, somehow, I felt more free than I had in years. It hit me then, this wasn't new. I'd always been the outsider. I'd spent so much time trying to earn a seat at a table that was never mine to begin with. And now that I'd finally pushed back, refused to eat their food, literally and metaphorically, they needed someone to blame. And of course it was me. Because the truth was too ugly to admit. The truth was, Janine had been the powder keg all along, and I just happened to be the one who lit the match. Rachel, meanwhile, had gone quiet. Radio silence. Which, somehow, felt worse than yelling. No questions. No apologies. Just nothing. And then, late one night, I got the message that changed everything. Not from her. From Thomas. A screenshot of a group chat between Janine, Rachel, and 2 other relatives. I don't know why he sent it. Maybe because he knew I needed to see it. Maybe because he was tired of being the only one with open eyes. The messages were dated 2 days before the party. Janine had written, "I'm going to test him. He's too comfortable saying no. If he really loved her, he'd eat the damn cake." And Rachel's reply? "He won't. He always makes himself the victim." I read that line at least 10 times. Each one cut deeper. They knew. They knew what was in that cake. They knew it would hurt me. And they did it anyway. Not just to test me, but to punish me. For not having kids. For not falling in line. For saying no. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Micah's kitchen with the overhead light buzzing faintly and the house humming with late-night silence. And I stared at that screen until my eyes ached. And I made a promise. I would never, ever, let myself be made small again. I didn't respond to the screenshot right away. I sat with it. Let it sink in like a splinter under the skin. There was something worse than rage stirring inside me. Something quieter and heavier. Finality. For a long time, I tried to see Rachel as a casualty of her upbringing. Raised by a mother who weaponized guilt and control like second nature. Rachel had grown up learning to bend, to perform, to appease. I thought if I gave her enough grace, she'd unlearn it. Thought if I was patient enough, she'd see the difference between love and loyalty at all costs. I was wrong. And the moment I saw her words, saw that she knew what that cake would do and still treated me like the problem, something in me finally shut down. I didn't scream. I didn't text her back. I didn't try to explain myself to her family. What was the point? Instead, I met with a lawyer. Micah came with me, sat in the corner quietly while I laid out the whole story. The manipulation, the cake, the text, the silence. The lawyer didn't even blink. Said I had more than enough to proceed if I wanted out. That word, out, hit like a clean breath after years underwater. She slid a packet of paperwork across the table. I didn't even hesitate. The next day, I sent Rachel a message. Simple, clean. We need to talk. Iva initiated procedures. No emotion, no drama, just a line drawn in the sand. She didn't respond for 2 hours. And when she finally did, all she wrote was, "So you're giving up that easy?" And that was when I realized she never really saw me as someone standing beside her, Just someone standing for her, propping her up, absorbing the hits, making excuses for things that should never have been excused. I replied, "No, I'm finally standing up for myself." 15 minutes later, my phone rang. Her name on the screen. I didn't answer. I let it ring while I packed a bag and called a storage unit near Brentwood. It was time to move forward. Alone, maybe, but clear-headed. And finally free. I thought she'd wait a few days. I really did. But the next evening, Rachel showed up at Micah's. Micah opened the door before I could stop him, said he'd be outside if I needed him, then left us in the living room, me standing beside the coffee table, her on the couch like it was still hers. She didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask why I left. She asked if we could pause the filing, just until things settled down. And I swear, in that moment, I saw the whole machinery behind her eyes. The calculations, the timing, the panic, because suddenly the family that used to crown her for compliance was crumbling. Thomas had officially moved out. Janine had gone full victim mode, telling anyone who'd listened that her entire family betrayed her. And now Rachel was floating in that limbo, where enablers go when the storm finally eats itself alive. She wasn't asking to fix us. She was asking for stability. A life raft. And I wasn't going to be that anymore. I told her no. Calmly. Firmly. She started crying, but not the messy, real kind. It was too controlled. Tears that came from strategy, not sorrow. Then she said something that twisted the knife. "You're blowing this all up because we didn't give you children." I didn't even blink. Just looked at her and said, "No. I'm walking away because you never protected me." Not once. She went quiet after that. Picked up her purse. Walked to the door. But before leaving, she turned and gave one last jab. Called me selfish, cold, and said I'd regret losing someone who loved me. I just nodded. Because here's the truth. Love without safety, without protection, without basic respect, isn't love. It's control. And I was done being controlled. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. No more surprise visits. No dramatic boythemes. Rachel went dark, and so did her family. The group chat that used to buzz like a hornet's nest fell silent. I guess once you stop playing the role they wrote for you, they stop needing to include you in the script. I started sleeping better. Still on that old futon at Micah's, but the sleep was different now. Heavier. Cleaner. I wasn't waking up with that dread in my chest. I wasn't checking my phone the second my eyes opened, bracing for another guilt trip or half apology dressed as manipulation. I was free. Not healed. Not yet. But undeniably free. And then, about a week later, someone I never expected knocked on Micah's door. Thomas. He had a small cardboard box in his arms. Said he didn't want to text, didn't want to call, just wanted to hand it to me in person. We sat on the porch while Micah gave us space, and Thomas laid the box between us. Inside were photos of me and Rachel, the good ones, from the first few years. Vacations, game nights, a weekend in Memphis where we got caught in a thunderstorm and laughed until we were soaked through. Thomas said he'd taken them himself, back when you both still looked like people who were on the same side. He said, "You didn't deserve what happened." I stayed silent too long, and I'm sorry for that. That hit harder than I expected. He wasn't a warm man. Never had been. But his voice cracked when he said those words. And maybe that's why it felt real, because Thomas never performed for anyone. Not like Janine. Not like Rachel had learned to. I didn't say much back. Just nodded. I think he understood that was enough. Before he left, he handed me a folded piece of paper. Said it was a copy of a deposition. Apparently, Janine had tried to file a restraining order against him. Claimed he had become abusive. Claimed he was the reason the family was broken. But the judge didn't buy it. Too many contradictions. Too many people, including Rachel's own brother, stepping forward and saying, finally, out loud, what they'd been whispering for years. Janine had built a kingdom out of fear, and the walls were crumbling. Thomas smiled faintly, told me that sometimes peace doesn't come in the form of resolution. Sometimes it just comes from removal. Then he added something that's still rattling around in my head. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is walk away without looking back. Then he turned, got in his truck, and drove off. I sat there for a long time, the photos in my lap, thinking about all the ways I used to bend just to keep the peace. And how peace, real peace, never required that in the first place. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. And there was no grand finale, no closure wrapped in a bow. Just the sound of a door shutting quietly behind me as I walked out of the building and into a life that finally belonged to me again. I got a small place just outside of Franklin. 1 bedroom, wood floors, big windows that catch the sun just right in the morning. It's not fancy, but it's mine. No ghosts here. No walking on eggshells. Just quiet. Micah helped me move. So it was weird seeing me actually smiling again. He joked that the futon was starting to miss me. I laughed, and it wasn't forced. Funny thing is, for a long time, I thought the biggest tragedy of my life was that I didn't want kids. That I was somehow robbing Rachel of something essential. That maybe Janine was right in her twisted way. That I was selfish. But standing here now, coffee in hand, sunlight pouring through the window, I realized something that hits deeper than any of their accusations ever could. I was never the one who ruined anything. I just stopped pretending. Janine still sends emails sometimes. Mostly dramatic subject lines with nothing in the body. One just said, "Hope you're happy." I never reply. Rachel hasn't contacted me since the papers were signed. And if I'm being honest, I hope she's okay. I don't hate her. I just finally understand her. And that's enough. As for me, I'm good.